Belgium has just threatened to refuse to play the United States, and it all comes down to FIFA's shocking decision to reverse Balogun's ban. The ruling has left officials, players, and fans in disbelief. Here's how it all unraveled. Let's set the scene properly, because the timeline here matters more than almost anything else in this story. Balogun reacted after scoring the US team's first goal during the World Cup round of 32 match between the United States and Bosnia-Herzegovina in Santa Clara, California. That was the highlight. The lowlight came later in the same match. Balogun received the red card in the 64th minute of the 2-0 victory in Santa Clara after clashing with an opponent for the ball. His right foot came down on the back of Tarek Muhermovic's right ankle. The referee didn't call it live. Balogun was sent off in the second half of the United States' victory over Bosnia and Herzegovina for a challenge on a defender, which the referee punished with a red card following a VAR review. Under the tournament's own rulebook, that's supposed to be the end of the discussion. The red card came automatically accompanied by a one-game suspension per Article 10.5 of FIFA's World Cup rules, and there was no path around it. The Athletic also reported that after the match, multiple FIFA officials said teams were unable to appeal red cards or the resulting suspensions. Balogun was done for the round of 16. That was the expectation going into the weekend. The US started planning around it, then Sunday happened. In a stunning reversal, FIFA's disciplinary committee announced it had rescinded the automatic one-game ban for the controversial red card Balogun had received against Bosnia and Herzegovina. Instead of sitting out Monday, he was placed on probation for 1 year. No hearing, no public appeal process. No warning shot to Belgium, just a statement by operation of Article 27 FDC. The implementation of the automatic match suspension for US player Balogun is suspended for a probationary period of 1 year. The reaction out of the Belgian camp was immediate, and it wasn't subtle. The Royal Belgian Football Federation said it was astonished by FIFA's decision to delay Balogun's suspension, and in its own statement Sunday, Belgium pointed to other FIFA regulations about the automatic nature of the red card suspension. Then came the line that's now sitting at the center of everything. The federation said it was investigating all potential options. For recourse, investigating all potential options is federation speak. It's the kind of phrase that sounds calm in a press release and means something much less calm in a locker room. Belgium wasn't just annoyed. They were floating out loud that they might not accept this match as legitimate, that legal challenges, appeals, or something bigger could be coming, possibly even after the final whistle. Head coach Rudy Garcia didn't bother hiding how personal this felt. I didn't know that at the World Cup the 5th of July is actually the 1st of April. It's April Fools, Garcia said at a Sunday news conference. He wasn't joking around though. When reporters pushed further, he said, "We're not defending the national team or the federation. We are defending football, its ethics, and its integrity." That's not the language of a coach shrugging off a bad break. That's the language of a federation that believes the tournament's rules just got rewritten for one team in real time, less than 24 hours before kickoff. His goalkeeper wasn't much softer. Had it been done earlier, we'd have been able to be mentally more prepared, perhaps, Belgium goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois said. Courtois and Garcia mostly refused to go further in public. They largely sidestepped numerous other questions about the Balogun decision, referring reporters to the Federation's statement in which it said it was astonished by the move and called it in direct contradiction to the rules FIFA itself set out for this tournament, but the door to something bigger than a press release stayed open. When asked whether Belgium might appeal the decision to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, perhaps even after the match, Garcia demurred. He didn't say no. And it wasn't just Belgium fuming from the sideline. Norway's coach, who wasn't even involved in this fixture, looked at the ruling and called it out unprompted. After his own team's round of 16 win, "I think that's a big mistake by FIFA. It's not a great conclusion," Solbakken said. "He has got a red card." VAR concluded it was a red card and he was sent off, so that means he is suspended. For one game, the Belgians will be furious, and what happens if he scores a goal? That wins the game. That question, what happens if he scores the winner, is exactly the kind of scenario that turns a disciplinary footnote into a full-blown international incident, because on the other side of this, the US camp wasn't apologizing for any of it, with Balogun officially cleared to return for the showdown against Belgium. The United States secured a massive tactical edge ahead of the round of 16. US Soccer's statement was polite but unmistakably relieved. "We accept the decision of the disciplinary committee and are pleased that Balogun is eligible to compete tomorrow. Our full attention is focused on the round of 16 match against Belgium in Seattle, and we look forward to the continued support of our amazing fans." So here's where the pieces sit heading into part 2. A striker who was supposed to be suspended is now not suspended. The team that has to play against him found out with barely a day's notice. And the federation representing that team is telling the world, on the record, that it's weighing every option it has, including ones that could threaten whether this match, or FIFA's authority over it, gets treated as legitimate at all. To understand how we even got here, you have to go back to the tackle itself, and to just how strange the process was that turned a foot on an ankle into the most talked about disciplinary call of the tournament. Strip away the politics for a second and just look at the football. Balogun was shown a controversial red card during the US 2-0 win over Bosnia-Herzegovina to start the knockout stage. The card came after replay review showed him inadvertently stepping on the back of the leg of Bosnia-Herzegovina's Tarek Muhermovic on the field in real time. The referee didn't even flag it. Balogun was not even cautioned on the field initially, and it was only after a slow-motion replay that VAR reviewed the events. That detail, the slow-motion part, turned out to be the whole ballgame. For critics of the call, Christina Unkel, a former FIFA referee who now works as a rules analyst, told reporters the review shouldn't have happened the way it did. She said the foul should not have been reviewed in the first place because it was not clear and obvious, adding, "It was a bit of a surprise that VAR actually made a recommendation down for what one would argue is more of a subjective play. That there is debate on both sides. There's a technical reason that distinction matters. VAR guidelines are specific about when officials are allowed to use slow motion versus real-time footage. Rules governing the use of VAR say that slow motion should only be used for facts, such as the point of contact for physical fouls or handball calls, while normal speed video should be used to judge intent and severity." Critics argued that watching a 50-50 duel for the ball frame by frame at quarter speed makes almost any contact look worse than it was. Balogun himself made that exact case days before the reversal, framing the whole thing as a case of two players simply competing for the ball. He felt the decision was unfair given that he and Muhermovic were battling for position, saying if you played the game, you would understand there are scenarios that you simply can't avoid and it has to be taken into context when it's being reviewed. His head coach went further and faster. Mauricio Pochettino didn't for the appeals process to say what he thought, mainly because there wasn't one. "For me, never is it a red card," head coach Pochettino said following the game. Against Bosnia-Herzegovina, if the intention is to damage the opponent, okay, I understand. But that was a normal action in football that you are, fighting for the ball. And your feet land, no. That frustration ran into a wall almost immediately. Because the tournament's rules left the US with nowhere to go, the US was also not able to appeal the decision, leaving Balogun's fate in the hands of the disciplinary committee. Fox News laid out the exact regulation blocking that path. Article 9.6 of the 2026 World Cup regulations reads, "No protests may be made about the referee's decisions regarding facts connected with play. Such decisions are final and not subject to appeal, unless otherwise stipulated in the FIFA disciplinary code." Weston McKennie summed up the mood in the locker room in blunter terms than most. "I think in this stage of the tournament where every player is important, I think it's a bit bogus," US midfielder Weston McKennie said of the situation. And the team, publicly at least, started preparing to play the biggest match of their tournament without their top scorer. Without an appeals process, the US began preparing to play without Balogun, probably with Ricardo Pepi on the front line, and Balogun continued training as normal, in preparation for a possible quarterfinal appearance against Spain or Portugal. Belgium, for its part, planned accordingly. As Christian Pulisic put it afterward, the mood inside the camp was resignation, not panic. "The team would have been ready without him," Pulisic said. "We have guys that can step up, there's no doubt about it. Obviously, we weren't sure this would happen, but we were prepared." So that's the football side of the story, a bang-bang play, a slow-motion review that turned a non-call into a red card, zero avenue to appeal it, and a locker room bracing to play a knockout match short-handed. On paper, that suspension was as close to bulletproof as anything in the FIFA rulebook gets. Which is exactly why what happened next raised so many eyebrows. Because the thing that finally cracked that no appeal wall wasn't a legal brief or a video review board. It was a phone call. President Trump spoke to Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA. The New York Times reported that President Donald Trump called FIFA President Gianni Infantino on Wednesday and asked for the World Cup governing body to review Balogun's ban. What did Trump actually want out of that call? Reporting suggests it wasn't a request to simply wave the ban away. It was framed as a request to understand the process. During the phone call with Infantino, Trump wanted to understand the reasoning behind the decision to give a red card and a suspension, according to an official with knowledge of the call. But the White House wasn't shy about characterizing the outcome once it landed. An official said that the US government provided additional evidence directed to FIFA, and that the association's disciplinary committee used that information in the process that led to Balogun's suspension being reversed, with the government focused on referees reviewing a slow-motion replay before the red card was issued. Ultimately, the correct and proper outcome was achieved, the official told MS Now. Trump wasn't quiet about his satisfaction once the ruling came down. He posted directly, "Right and reversing a great injustice," the president said on Truth Social. FIFA notably has stayed almost completely silent on whether the call had any bearing on the ruling. FIFA has not said whether the call played any role in the decision, and FIFA did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The official written explanation stuck strictly to the rulebook. The judicial body may decide to fully or partially suspend the implementation of a disciplinary measure. By suspending the implementation of the sanction, the judicial body subjects the person's sanction to a probationary period of 1 to 4 years, the rule states. This isn't happening in a vacuum either. Trump's relationship with FIFA's president has been under a microscope for other reasons entirely. Trump's 2025 financial disclosure revealed that Infantino gave Trump 10 tickets, valued at $15,000, to last July's FIFA Club World Cup final at MetLife Stadium, and Trump attended that match and joined Infantino on the field to present the trophy. Add to that the fact that Trump has been heavily involved in the tournament, which the US is co-hosting with Mexico and Canada, and you've got a president who's already deeply embedded in this World Cup, now personally credited with reversing a suspension for the national team's biggest goal scorer. There's a personal layer to this too that made the moment resonate beyond soccer. Balogun is a US citizen by birth. That single fact landed at an odd moment politically, because Trump last week lost a case at the Supreme Court, which blocked an executive order he issued to sharply restrict birthright citizenship. Balogun's own path to the national team leans directly on the quirks of that citizenship. Balogun was in the US only because his parents were visiting New York, and his mother was deemed too pregnant to fly back to London. After having played for England during his youth career, Balogun ultimately decided to play for the US. A player whose American eligibility exists almost by accident of geography, became the centerpiece of a presidential intervention into FIFA's disciplinary process, during the same news cycle as a birthright citizenship ruling. Nobody planned that collision, it happened anyway. Inside the US camp, the mood around the political noise was almost entirely separate from the football. Pulisic, when pressed, drew a clean line between the decision and the sport itself. There was much worse incidents that went on in this tournament. US star Christian Pulisic said, "It just feels right." He was careful not to take a shot at the technology that flagged the tackle in the first place. "I'm not going to go and criticize VAR, it's done a lot of good things too. Unfortunately, it kind of went against us in that last one. It can go both ways." Pulisic said Pochettino leaned into the same idea, that the system is designed to correct itself, and this was simply that system working as intended from his seat. "No, we cannot mix that, Pochettino said. Balogun is a decision from the FIFA with the evidence that happened before. And that for me is very good for football, is to celebrate. Because if some in the next game or the game that they are playing now, and something unfair thing happen, you have the possibility to go and to reverse the decision. Decision that came from the VAR, from situation that is slow motion. That never is the reality of what happened on the pitch. Even the players learned about the reversal in a way that felt almost unreal. Some found out mid-commute. Players learned of Balogun's availability when social media posts started popping up during the 10-minute bus ride Sunday from their hotel to training. I think a lot of us thought it was AI at first. Defender Chris Richards said, "We weren't sure if it was true or not." Balogun himself got the news the same way most of his teammates did, through the team, not through any formal notice. Balogun found out about the decision in a team meeting Sunday. A source familiar with the situation said, "That's the strange texture of how this news actually spread. Not a hearing, not a document, but a phone call between two powerful men, followed by a locker room announcement, followed by players scrolling their phones on a bus, unsure if what they were reading was even real." Which brings us to the part of this story that's really about paper. The actual rulebook Belgium is now trying to use as a weapon. If Belgium's federation is going to threaten anything beyond a strongly worded statement, it needs a legal foothold. And it built one article by article, in the same statement that called the decision astonished. The federation didn't just complain. It quoted FIFA's own code back at FIFA. In a statement, the Royal Belgian Football Association called into question Article 66.4 of FIFA's disciplinary code. FIFA bases its decision on Article 27 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code. This provision states that the FIFA Disciplinary Committee may decide to suspend the enforcement of a previously imposed disciplinary sanction. Then came the contradiction they say FIFA is ignoring. However, Article 66.4 of the same FIFA Disciplinary Code clearly provides that a red card sending off automatically results in a suspension for the team's next match, as has been the case for all previous red cards issued during this FIFA World Cup. Belgium didn't stop at one contradiction. They pointed to the tournament's own separate competition rules as a second layer of conflict. Furthermore, and irrespective of the above, the decision is in direct contradiction with the provisions of the FIFA World Cup 2026 competition regulations, as set out in Article 10.5. The automatic nature of such a suspension was also explicitly reaffirmed in FIFA World Cup 2026 Circular No. 16, which was distributed to all participating member associations on 12 May 2026. And they went further to argue this wasn't some obscure technicality buried in a footnote. It was something every federation had been told about repeatedly. The same rule is reiterated at every FIFA World Cup 2026 match coordination meeting prior to each match and is included in all FIFA World Cup 2026 workshop presentations. That's the crux of Belgium's argument. FIFA spent months telling every federation in the tournament that a red card equals an automatic ban. No exceptions, and then created an exception nobody saw coming for the co-host nation on the eve of a knockout match. Sourced from evidence the US government itself had a hand in supplying. The closing line of their statement is the one worth sitting with, because it's the one that stretches past this single match. In order to safeguard the legitimate rights of all participating teams, and to protect the fundamental principles of fair play in our sport, both at this FIFA World Cup and at future editions of the tournament, the RBFA is investigating all potential options. Read that again. Belgium isn't only talking about Monday's game. They're talking about future editions of the tournament. That's a federation signaling this isn't just a one-off gripe they'll swallow after full time. It's a precedent they're prepared to fight over long after this World Cup ends, potentially in front of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The body Garcia was asked about directly and chose not to rule out. FIFA, for its part, has leaned on precedent to justify the call, arguing this isn't as unprecedented as it looks. And there is a real paper trail of similar moves. FIFA in November deferred the final 2 games of a 3-match ban for Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo for a red card against Ireland in a World Cup qualifier, allowing him to play at the start of the World Cup. Argentina defender Nicolás Otamendi and Ecuador midfielder Moises Caicedo in April had 1-game bans deferred for red cards in qualifiers, also allowing them to be available for World Cup openers. But the Ronaldo case, the one FIFA leans on hardest, actually has a meaningful difference buried in it. Ronaldo's red card came in a match before the World Cup, and he served the first game of the 3-game suspension before the World Cup began. Balogun's situation skipped that step entirely. His suspension was erased before he served any part of it, mid-tournament, for a card shown during the tournament itself. That's a distinction Belgium's federation has leaned on hard. In arguing this case breaks new ground rather than following old precedent. And it does by FIFA's own historical record. The decision appears to be only the second known instance of FIFA lifting a World Cup red card suspension, and the first since Brazil's Garrincha was cleared to play in the 1962 final, after being sent off in the semi-final. More than 60 years between the 2 instances. One of them is Balogun in Seattle, days after a presidential phone call. Even sources sympathetic to the reversal have acknowledged how far outside the norm this is. FIFA, for the first time in more than 60 years of World Cup matches, said it would allow him to play in the next game. That's the shape of Belgium's fight. A fresh, specific rule violation, stacked on top of a 64-year gap in precedent. Stacked on top of a phone call from the sitting US president to the head of the organization making the ruling. On paper, it's not a bad case to bring somewhere. Whether investigating all potential options ever turns into an actual filing at CAS, or stays contained to press conferences and strongly worded statements, is the one thread this story hadn't resolved by kickoff, which leaves one place left to go, the match itself, and everything that's riding on it now that Balogun's boots are back on the field. By the time the teams walked out in Seattle, this had stopped being a story about a red card. It was a story about whether a single disciplinary reversal could shape the outcome. of one of the biggest matches in US men's soccer history, and whether Belgium would treat that outcome as legitimate no matter what happened on the scoreboard. The stakes on the field alone were enormous. Monday's round of 16 match against Belgium is one of the biggest in the history of the US men's national team. A win would send the US to the quarterfinals, matching the deepest run by the American men in the modern era of the World Cup in 2002. And Balogun wasn't just any player being reinstated. He was the difference maker. It's a major boost to the team, as Balogun has scored 3 goals in the World Cup so far. His presence in the attack has created a real danger, and it'll be on display as they look to make the quarterfinals. For the first time since 2002, Belgium walked into that knowing exactly what they were facing, and Courtois made clear his team wasn't hiding from it. But we'll be ready, we'll be on the pitch. They have 11 players, not only Balogun, Courtois said. Defiant, but also a tacit admission of just how much of the pre-match conversation had been consumed by one player who, 24 hours earlier, wasn't supposed to be eligible at all. On the American side, the emotional tone around Balogun's return had almost nothing to do with rules or politics. Pulisic, who'd been vocal all week, framed it in personal terms once his teammate was actually back in the fold. Christian Pulisic called the referee's decision to give Balogun a red card extremely harsh, and said, "I'm mostly just happy for him, seeing that smile on his face. He deserves to be playing in this game." A day later, reflecting on how Balogun had carried himself through the entire ordeal, Pulisic added something warmer. "Good things happen to people like that, and he was so positive and all for the team. And it just feels right," Pulisic said. Even players who weren't sure the ruling was right leaned toward just accepting it and moving forward. Asked whether he thought FIFA made the right decision rescinding Balogun's suspension, defender Alex Freeman said, "The decision, right or wrong, we're just happy to have him." A sentiment that captures where most of the American camp landed. Grateful, not particularly interested in litigating the ethics of it out loud. Meanwhile, US soccer kept its public posture deliberately narrow, sticking to the same measured language they'd used since Sunday morning. The USSF was reportedly engaged in the process with the disciplinary committee, and Balogun was informed of the decision during a team meeting before the team left for training on Sunday. No victory lap, no commentary on Belgium's statement, just a federation quietly accepting a gift it hadn't expected to receive. And that's really the tension sitting underneath everything as the match kicked off. One federation treating this as a solved problem, ready to move on. The other treating it as very much unresolved. A grievance that, by their own words, extends beyond this single game into the future of how FIFA runs its disciplinary process at World Cups going forward. Belgium's federation never walked back the investigating all potential options language, and Garcia never gave a straight answer on whether court of arbitration action was actually coming. That's not nothing. National federations don't usually leave the door open to legal escalation against the sport's own governing body unless they believe they have a real case. And Belgium clearly believes it does, given how precisely they cited FIFA's own articles back at FIFA. Whether that turns into an actual filing, a formal protest lodged after the final whistle, or simply fades into a footnote the moment the tournament moves on to its next round, is the one part of this story that hadn't been settled as the two teams took the pitch. What had been settled beyond any argument is this: a red card that was supposed to be untouchable got touched anyway. A president who said he wanted answers walked away with a headline he was happy to claim credit for. And a federation representing one of the tournament's most dangerous teams spent the 24 hours before a knockout match telling the world, on the record, that it no longer fully trusts the body running the competition it's playing in. That's not a footnote to a World Cup. That's the kind of standoff that outlives a single scoreline: win, lose.